Hasselblad. One of the most prestigious names in the photography world, a brand renowned for its film and digital medium format systems, technical excellence, and for sending cameras to the literal moon, or just to a warehouse on a top secret film set somewhere in the US if you're one of the smooth-brained among us. But what if I told you that not too long ago, Hasselblad created something that was such a blatant rip-off that it almost permanently sullied the company's good name? Well, my friends, let me introduce you to the Hasselblad Lunar, a camera many of you may not have even ever heard of before, perhaps for a good reason. That's because not only was this the company's first venture into the mirrorless camera market, but it was also a camera that was completely ridiculous, unjustifiably expensive, and so clearly a scam that, of course, I had to buy one for myself to see what it was actually like.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
So at this point, you're probably wondering, why do I consider this camera to be a scam? Sure, it's a little bit weird looking, but it seems legit, right? Bit like me, I guess. Well, to explain that, let's rewind a moment. The year was 2012. The Curiosity rover had just touched down on Mars, Gangnam Style was busy breaking the internet, and the mirrorless camera market was starting to boom. Sony had just released the NEX7, a compact mirrorless camera with a 24 megapixel sensor, OLED viewfinder, and full manual control. Meanwhile, somewhere in Sweden, Hasselblad execs decided that they wanted a piece of the mirrorless camera action, but the route they took was, well, not one that anyone expected. You see, this is a company that for years has been synonymous with making high-end, high-resolution, medium format systems, cameras that cost more than your car. So when they announced that they were entering into the mirrorless game, everyone kind of got excited. What would a Hasselblad mirrorless system look like? Would it have a large sensor, medium format perhaps? Well, turns out the answer was none of the above. It seems that rather than cultivating a brand new mirrorless camera system from scratch, someone in the R&D department had a better idea. They instead decided to just copy Sony's homework and took the already pretty successful NEX7 design, changed absolutely nothing about the internals, and just wrapped it in a camera frame made from posh materials, slapped a Hasselblad logo on the front, and then wrapped things up for the day to go down the pub. Well, I'm guessing, but that's what I would do. What followed was this, the Hasselblad Lunar, the photographic equivalent of buying a Honda Civic, wrapping it in carbon fiber and crocodile leather and trying to sell it off as a Bentley. And they didn't even try to hide what they'd done either. As you can see on the back here, the Sony logo is still clearly visible on the rear screen. To the company's credit, they were completely open and honest about what this camera was from the get-go. So, big deal, you're probably thinking. I don't see the harm in doing any of that. Well, that's also what a lot of people thought at the time, at least until they found out about the price. Are you ready? At launch, this camera retailed for a staggering $7,000 US.
Disgusting!
Meanwhile, you could pick up a Sony NEX7, which is literally the exact same camera, for just under $1,200. So, hold on a minute, what's the catch here? There must be some kind of added value added to this camera, right? You can't just change the aesthetics and then think that justifies a hideous price tag. Well, no. Not really. This Hasselblad version didn't come with a premium lens, it didn't come with better specs, it didn't even come with a redesigned UI to make it feel more like a unique camera. No, this was just a Sony camera in a slightly fancier body and a wildly inflated price tag, justified by the fact that it now had Hasselblad written on the front, but not on the back apparently, because that seemed like too much effort. So at this point, you might be slightly concerned for my own sanity, because obviously I paid some amount of money for this thing. Well, the good news is that I didn't pay almost $7,000 for it, because unfortunately I ran out of kidneys to sell years back, so there's no chance of me being able to afford that kind of price tag. The bad news, however, well, for my wife at least, she's not listening, I still had to pay more than anyone with even a shred of sanity should pay for something like this. Now, in my defense, these things are kind of rare these days because not many people actually bought them at the time. I know, hard to believe, but I actually managed to find this copy for sale on eBay in near mint condition for 1,800 euros, which is about $2,155 US, all in the name of science and making YouTube content.
I'm gonna divorce you!
But anyway, it did at least come in this super fancy box that I can now show off to all my friends one day when I make some. No, but seriously, this isn't a prop from a Christopher Nolan film. This is the actual box these cameras came in, and I can only guess that someone at the factory felt guilty and at least wanted the unboxing experience to be somewhat luxurious for the saps that actually bought the camera. And to be fair, this is probably more premium feeling than the actual camera itself. It's all felt lined and it's made from solid varnished wood and all of that good stuff. But before that, I quickly want to mention something else that I found inside this box. It's actually hidden in another drawer down here, and if you pull this out, under the now ancient CD-ROM is this official document. Brace yourselves. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, what I have here in my hands is an official invitation to join the Hasselblad Lunar Owners Club, which I can only assume now includes me, an oil tycoon from Dubai, and maybe somebody's wealthy auntie who accidentally clicked on the wrong link on B&H in 2013. Either way, I hope you are now all aware that this officially makes me way more important than all of you watching. Don't worry, I won't let it get to my head. Now, extravagant luxury aside, let's talk about the actual camera. As I've already mentioned, this is literally just a Sony NEX7 in drag. I can't even truthfully say that this is a reskinned NEX7 because on closer inspection it appears that they've not even bothered to go to that much effort. What it appears like they've done here is just encase an existing NEX7 in a fancy cage, making the whole thing feel a lot more chunky and, well, ugly. Inside it has the same 24 megapixel aps-c sensor, the same autofocus system, the same menu system, albeit with some of the graphics changed ever so slightly, but effectively it has the same everything. Now, in fairness, none of that makes this a bad camera. Actually, quite the opposite. This new chunkier grip actually makes it much more comfortable to hold. The top dials are now way more pronounced, making them easier to locate by touch alone. And the build quality is pretty luxurious, I will give them that. They really haven't skimped on the materials here. Well, I mean, besides the tacky fake ruby that they've used to vajazzle the record button for some weird reason. Anyway, depending on which version of this camera you got, the body was either wrapped in wood, carbon fiber, or leather. As you can see, I've gone for the GIMP leather finish, and I'll be honest, it feels oddly satisfying to hold. Anyway, enough of that. Now, obviously, this high quality jeweled button can only mean one thing. This thing can record video too. But as you would expect from a camera of its age, it only offers very basic 1080p HD capture, but better than nothing, I guess. Now, speaking of high quality, when it comes to cameras as expensive as this, I obviously want to make sure that I'm only attaching high quality filters to the front. That's why I use filters made by my friends over at K&F Concept, who are also kind enough to show their support for the channel by sponsoring this episode. Now, first things first, you might be wondering, why does that look a little bit weird? Well, here's a handy little hack for you. Because I end up testing so many different types and sizes of lens on this channel, instead of buying endless filters in every possible thread size, I instead buy something like this, which is a set of stepping adapter rings, also made by K&F Concept. Now, this whole set cost me just under $28, so it's really affordable, and it means that I can now fit this large 82mm filter on just about any lens, including this smaller lens here with a very small filter thread, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. Now, speaking of which, I've also been having a lot of fun with this Nano X Pro Series lens filter, which has a bit of a trick up its sleeve. And that's because this is actually a 2-in-1 filter, meaning that it acts as both a 1 to 5 stop variable ND and a CPL filter, or polarizing filter. The ND is adjusted by using this outer ring with these two golden handles, as you can see here. And then the polarizing effect is actually changed using the inner ring, and that makes it perfect for removing reflections from water or glass, or just helping to make the colors in the sky pop. I'll be sure to leave links to everything I've just mentioned in a pinned comment below and in the video description if you're interested. Now, as I was saying, this camera did also come bundled with a lens, and this is the Hasselblad 18 to 55mm f3.5 to 5.6 OSS, which unsurprisingly is just another Sony ripoff. All they've done here is scratch off the Sony logo off a standard kit lens and then replaced it with a Hasselblad one. Well, actually, that's slightly unfair. They did also replace the standard clip-on lens cap with this much more premium feeling screw-on metal one, which takes way longer to get on and off, and as you can see, has a hole in it so the dust can get in. Thanks, lads. And they also changed the plastic lens hood slightly so that it now matches the front material used on the camera, which I admit is actually quite a nice touch. But anyway, what's this camera actually like to shoot with? Well, I've said it before and I will say it again. This is just a Sony NEX7 with a cage on it, so it's actually not that bad at all. Luckily, the 24 megapixel aps-c sensor still holds up and the dynamic range is fairly decent given its age. As you can see from these shots here, which are all RAWs taken with this camera and edited using my own custom-made presets in Lightroom. And I was pretty impressed with how they turned out, given that the presets were cultivated using images taken on a much more recent full-frame Sony camera. On a side note, if you do happen to agree with me and you like how these images have turned out, be sure to check out the pinned comment below for a link to my web store and a discount code to get yourself 10% off everything in store. I should also mention that the autofocus is still plenty usable. Honestly, I've tested cameras that are 5 or 6 years younger than this one and they've sucked in comparison. Now, whilst I'm not the biggest fan of using kit lenses, this one isn't actually all that bad. It's small, responsive, and has a pretty versatile zoom range. If I posted these images on Instagram and didn't tell you what camera they were taken on, you almost certainly wouldn't think the camera behind them was an old relic like this. However, the problem is, once you do know what camera they were taken on, the whole experience kind of feels a bit ridiculous. It's like wearing a tuxedo to do the school run. Every time I pick this camera up, I'm kind of reminded that this was a camera made with only one purpose in mind: to look expensive and let everyone around you know just how much money you have to burn. And you can't even argue that you bought the camera for its unique shooting experience, because if that was the case, why wouldn't you just buy the original Sony NEX7 and slap a grip on it? Because that would be a fraction of the cost and provides the exact same shooting performance. No, this camera is all about image and perceived wealth, which for me makes the experience feel almost entirely fake. Sadly though, Hasselblad didn't stop there. In fact, they worked with Sony on 4 more cameras after this one. Shortly after the launch of the Lunar, Hasselblad cooked up the Stella, which was clearly just a rebadged Sony RX100 priced at a little under $2,000, making it 3 times the price of the original RX100s at launch. Then in 2014, there was the Hasselblad HV, which no, isn't a venereal disease, it's just a rebranded Sony A99. Although the internal specs were identical, it retailed for an eye-watering $11,500 for the body only. Meanwhile, the original Sony A99 retailed for $2,800, making it less than a quarter of the cost. Later in the same year, they released the Stella 2, which unsurprisingly was based on the Sony RX100 Mark II, and that was priced at around $2,400, costing over double the vanilla Sony version. The final release was the Hasselblad Lunar, which arrived in mid-2015. This was based on the full-frame Sony A7R, but was released in extremely limited quantities, with less than 100 units actually being sold. The estimated launch price was around $5,150, and that makes it around double the original A7R's price at launch. So, how did all of this turn out for Hasselblad? Well, about as well as you would expect, really. Turns out these things didn't sell too well, and by 2015, Hasselblad had to enlist the help of retailers like B&H to try and help get rid of all of the unsold units by dramatically slashing the price. This Lunar, for example, was reduced by a whopping $5.5 grand, which only further highlights what a rip-off these things were and how huge the profit margin must have been. Now, thankfully, it didn't take long for Hasselblad to find its footing again, and today the company is focused once again on what it does best, creating exquisitely crafted, powerful, and yes, still pretty expensive digital cameras. But this time with a firm return to the medium format realm, a space Hasselblad helped to carve from the very beginning. So, who wants to buy a camera? Anyone?
Nope.